Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Today we'll be discussing the 14th and hopefully the 15th Amendment of the United States Constitution. As you grab Michael Holler's book or your copy from Wall Builders, Constitution Alive, I'd like to thank you for joining us as we take one step further on our journey through the history and foundation of the United States of America. Would you like to be a part of what we're doing? Go out and get your own book. Do this yourselves. You don't need us to show you how. You don't need us to do your thinking for you. You're smart. You do it. All right, who's reading first?
All right, that'll be me, Doug. Amendment 14 passed by Congress June 13th, 1866, ratified July 9th, 1868. Says no, Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution was modified by Section 2 of the 14th Amendment. So, Section 1. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws.
All right, Section 2. Representatives shall be appointed among the several states according to their respective numbers, counting the whole numbers of persons in each state, excluding Indians not taxed. But when the right to vote at any election, choice of electors for President and Vice President of the United States, representatives in Congress, the executive and judicial officers of a state, or the members of the legislature thereof, is denied to any of the male inhabitants of such state, being 21 years of age, and citizens of the United States, or in any way abridged, except for participation in rebellion or other crime, the basis of representation therein shall be reduced in the proportion which the number of such male citizens shall bear to the whole number of male citizens 21 years of age in such state.
Section 3. No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president, or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state, who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as a member of any state legislature or as an executive or judicial officer of any state to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. But Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability.
Section 4. The validity of the public debt of the United States authorized by law, including debts incurred for payment of pensions and bounties for services and suppressing insurrection or rebellion, shall not be questioned. But neither the United States nor any state shall assume or pay any debt or obligation incurred in aid of insurrection or rebellion against the United States, or any claim for the loss of emancipation of any slave. But all such debts, obligations, and claims shall be held illegal and void.
And Section 5. Congress shall have the power to enforce, by appropriate legislation, the provisions of this article.
All right, the big bad Article 14. I'm sorry, but Section 3 is a run-on sentence.
Yeah, the entire thing was 2 sentences.
All right, first thoughts out of that.
I thought they kind of jumped around a bit. I didn't expect it to go into voting after talking about the citizens.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of different areas that are addressed in this amendment.
It makes me wonder before the 14th Amendment what voting was like, because this is really the first time it prescribes a voting as, in this case, any male over 21 years of age. Your point does bring up the suffrage conversation. I'll bring that up when we talk about this section specifically. So,
Yeah, I guess I didn't even notice. It's still just men that are allowed to vote, huh?
no, you'll notice the male inhabitants and 21 years of age is all underlined, which means it's going to be changed later by another amendment.
Right, but up until this point, this amendment still was just white males over 21.
Males, not just white, all
Oh,
males.
okay.
So
I didn't even notice that when we were reading it. There was. Or do you want to start on section 1? Is that what we're
yeah,
going to?
might as well grab that first. The big bad section 1, by which I want to read that. Let I want that part read again because it's very important. Because it is through section 1 that we get that the judges make birthright citizenship
Yeah.
for foreign nationals. So let's read through that part again because we need to zoom in on what it actually says about that. Does anybody want to read or should I?
No, and I can read it again.
Okay.
Go a bit slower. It says, "Is all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws."
Mhm.
So, um,
So,
yeah, just when it says naturalized, because it says born or naturalized,
mhm.
what was like the context of this that they would consider someone being naturalized?
If we remember in the Wayback Machine, the Article 1 of the United States Constitution, where it said the three-fifths compromise, that three-fifths of non-freed individuals would still be counted. So what this does is that anybody who's subject to that counting is now a citizen.
Hmm.
So there's already been a mechanism put in place for people to be naturalized. Um, what this means, what this has been taken to mean is that anybody born in the United States is now automatically a citizen and
Mhm.
therefore are naturalized simply by being born here.
Hmm.
But what it was originally for is that there were all these slaves post-war who are still not given their freedoms, who are still not allowed to vote. And there's a whole lot of shenanigans during the Reconstruction period where they're trying to rebuild the South, especially after, it lost a war and its economy is already suffering. And they took that out on the blacks and the former
Hmm.
slaves. And it's ugly history, but we have to stare at it and look at it. What this does is says, all right, if you're counting them for representatives, fine. They're citizens too. Full representation, full citizenship.
Hmm. So the initial um, reason, I guess, for that wasn't, to make you know foreigners that come into the country and have kids here wasn't to make them children, or I'm sorry, citizens.
Mm-mm.
Wh- um, when did that get added? Is that an amendment, or is that just an interpretation of the Constitution? That
Supreme Court interpretation.
okay?
Hmm.
When did that come into play? Do you know off the top of your head?
Off the top of my head, no.
Okay, yeah, it ended up they did it for one reason, and then ended up having a huge effect on. I mean, that's such a big issue in today's world, and it continues to be because it's almost an incentive, like just got to get across the border, give birth, and
Hmm.
then citizens. And it's
And some states have pregnancy vacations where people from foreign nations can come have their baby here and then go back home so that their baby's a US citizen. But then there's also anchor babies in that whole discussion. But that comes from a Supreme Court ruling on this section right here, this part. It
uh,
was to protect the rights of ex-slaves in the South and make them citizens. I think there was during the Jim Crow area grandfather law, where if your grandfather couldn't vote, neither could you.
Mm.
Like, well, their grandfather was here. There's 3 generations here. They can be citizens too. So,
Mm. Grandfathered in is, I guess, the better use of term would be grandfathered out.
correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's I'm not sure if the Supreme Court has overturned that yet.
Overturned what?
Overturned the previous judicial precedents. Because anytime a Supreme Court overturns a Supreme Court ruling, it overturns that Supreme Court ruling, and that's the new judgment.
Mm.
So,
You're talking about the birthright thing.
yes.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know that could even, or the thought of that changing never crossed my mind.
Yep. For example, let's bring up the big ugly one, abortion. Abortion was legal. Supreme Court ruling overturned it, said you're not using these principles correctly. Here's how, here's why. No longer a national right, no longer nationally protected. It's now a states' right issue. It doesn't even outlaw it. It just says the states themselves make the laws. And so, following what we read in the 10th Amendment, ninth, 10th, I forget, out of the Bill of Rights, it kicks that back down to the proper jurisdictions.
Yeah, I remember obviously when that happened, but I didn't know that it became a state issue. And you wouldn't have known that based on the uproar that it caused, because I mean they did it the way they were supposed to do it,
Yeah,
back to the states, like you said.
yeah. Once
So,
again, going to states' rights.
and I mean, even if it was, legal federally, certain states could still make it illegal if they'd wanted to anyway, right? I mean, you see that with marijuana going the other way, no?
Um, we haven't crossed that Rubicon yet. There are
Okay.
many states who make things legal that the federal government has made illegal. And I mean, look at immigration. I mean, we're talking about immigration here. We don't have to, I mean, pot, immigration. The United States of America has a duty, the federal government has a duty to protect the black lines. And immigration comes across the federal border into the states.
Mm.
Now, um, once again, this goes back to born or naturalized. There is a naturalization process. There is an open door that you can sign the guest registry, put my name down here, I want to be a citizen.
Mhm.
So, and there is that process to become a citizen of the United States and then of the state that you're living in.
Yeah, the problem always comes when, due process isn't followed and
Mhm.
the right is abused.
For the record, those who come across the border illegally, there is a due process for entry. If you're outside of that due process, you have given up your due process. There is a due process to enter into our country. So if you're complaining about due process on your way out, well, you should have followed it on your way in,
Hmm. Gotcha.
which is kind of weird. All right. Any more comments on section one?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Section two is a reestablishment of representatives. And this overwrites, once again, we talked about back when we were in, I forget which article. No, that was Article 1. That was fifth paragraph in.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at.
Article 1 of the United States Constitution, way back in the time machine. You guys have to go way back in our video history to find this. Back before the ever difficult Article 2. Thank goodness we're not looking back in there this time. Fifth paragraph down. Flipping through pages. Yeah, that Fifth paragraph down, this rewrites. Totally deletes and overwrites.
You say fifth paragraph. I'm looking, it says,
One, two, three.
okay, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so the third paragraph of section 2. That's what we're
Yep.
looking at. That's what I thought.
Sorry, that was a callback to when we had that conversation about that paragraph. And people who didn't quote it properly couldn't even read 5 paragraphs into the Constitution to find where it is. And
Yeah,
here we are nearing the finish line.
that's wild.
Yep. So this is the total rewrite of that section. It kicks it out. So for those of you who are talking about that, how racist we were to put that in there, that's fine. It got kicked out, even though when we already discussed it, it wasn't racist. It was to keep slavery from expanding. But once slavery was abolished, it wasn't necessary anymore.
So, kind of going back to what we talked about earlier, what was the thought process for not allowing women to vote back at this time? Because I mean, we're 100 years after the country was founded at this point.
Right.
Why were we still not allowing women to vote?
Originally, I believe it was only households that voted and those that owned property. So if the wife, husband, wife, like my family, 4, I would vote for all 4.
Hmm.
And because we were the owners of this property, we would get a vote because whatever we decided for the government would affect us because we own property. Now, I die. My wife gets my life insurance package. She now votes for the household. So originally it was household voting.
Hmm.
Um, I do not know where, and I will need a lawyer to go into this, but then it just became, I think this might have been it. Once again, any male 21 years can vote. That is non-property owners, so in other words, people without skin in the game. Um, but I think, but okay, so let's get into suffrage really quick because suffrage is different than voting. So for all you feminists out there, I wanted to lay this down really clear. Women still do not have the same voting rights as men do. They do not have the same suffrage. To elaborate, suffrage is not just voting. Suffrage is getting called up for draft, be a part of the volunteer fire department, also known as a bucket brigade. Bucket duty was a thing back then, and quite a few other. When the dam bursts, men are called into action
Hmm.
because they can possibly have skin in the game, whether war or flooding or hurricanes or whatever. They were then given the opportunity to vote. That was suffrage. Women have the right to vote, but without the other several responsibilities that come with it.
Hmm. They didn't teach us that in school. That's the
No.
first I've heard that.
Yeah, so feminists, please complain that you do not get the same suffrage that men do.
That that's really fascinating. The idea of voting as a family unit, and
Yeah,
I mean that barely exists. Nowadays, 50% of marriages end in divorce. So that's crazy to think about.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and also property owners.
yeah, I didn't know
So
that.
as a renter, I couldn't vote. My family cannot vote. We rent. We don't have the skin in the game.
Yeah.
Personally, on an aside, I am a representative tax guy. You only vote on things that you will pay for. So as I am directly pay for, let me put it that way, directly, not indirectly, directly. We had this problem in Washington State where renters would vote up property taxes and then complain because their landlords were gouging them in rents because they didn't realize that when you raise property taxes, somebody's got to pay those higher costs in businesses.
Yep.
So, for example, so I believe that um, if it's going cars, gas tax, perfectly fine. They pay for roads. Bicycles, they need to be taxed somehow to pay for bike lanes, not cars. Cars are not allowed in bike lanes. It's for bikes only. So bicycles need to pay for those. Runners need to pay for, trails. Um, but it is a representative. If you use it, you need to pay for it. So I am for either a gas tax or a toll, not both, one or the other. Um, Florida has both. Washington developed both, and there's a few other states that have both. So,
It's tough to enforce something like that, though. I mean,
yeah,
like would that just be you purchase a bike and you pay an extra bike tax? Is that what you're talking about?
yeah, or bike tires or something.
Yeah.
Tires will last X amount of time. Put the tax on the tires. The more rubber you put down, it. There are flaws to it, but there's flaws to everything. So, um, but yeah, property tax owners would only vote on property tax. Men who can be drafted for war can be the only ones who can vote on wars. Or only military men who are serving can vote on which wars they get involved in. If you're going to put your skin on the line. For the record, I support our troops. I just think some of the people who order them what to do are adults.
Yeah, how much different would the military be if they were the ones making the military decisions?
That could also get dangerous as they can turn into a mercenary group.
For sure.
So, not entirely checks and balances.
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
it could also be that they vote to go fight in the field over here and they ask people to support them, and that's how they get the money to buy the Humvees and the other equipment. But whatever. Those are my thoughts. They're incomplete. I haven't actually discussed them with anybody. So,
No, I'm with you. I think it's a great idea. I mean, how many times do we see people that have no business being that's off topic. I'm not going to go
yeah,
there. Let's continue.
only fetuses can vote for abortion, stuff like that.
There you go.
All right. Anything else? So, yeah, does that wrap up section two?
That'd probably be a pretty low turnout, year after. Yeah, I'm good with section two.
Okay, section three. So, I'm going to paraphrase this quite a bit because this is a long run-on sentence. Um, if you rebelled against the US, you cannot hold any more political or military office unless two-thirds of both houses choose to reinstate you. So everybody who was from the South automatically no, you cannot rejoin our government. You rebelled. Um, if, say, Robert E. Lee wanted to keep his generalship and did not want to retire, and both houses said yes, you're a good man, you can come back in, then yeah, he would be reinstated as general in the United States military.
Hmm. Would that go under? That would be an officer of the United States.
Yeah,
So, I mean, this was obviously put in place for the people that were on the South. Has this been? Has anybody been voted back in since then? I mean,
I really don't know the history on this one,
okay.
but yeah, I mean there is a way back in, and it's more than popularity when two-thirds of both sides have to vote you back in.
Yeah, that's a large number of people in both houses.
And somebody you fought against and killed their family of and their kin,
Yeah.
or you are their kin.
Hmm.
Is this the section that they're trying to use on Trump to remove him from the ballots? Or is that something else? For
That,
like January 6th?
yeah. But once again, Shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same. You still have to be charged with it, I believe, but you can't just go screaming, engaged in insurrection, and it automatically sticks. There has to actually be a court precedence. And at no time did the 34 felonious Donald Trump get charged with insurrection. At no time on January 6th did anybody get charged with insurrection.
Hmm.
Nobody.
Hmm. Didn't know that.
Yeah. But they just say insurrection, 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 insurrection. There, they can't vote now, right?
It's all about being louder than everyone else these days.
Yeah. I'm a 48 hours news cycle kind of guy. I'll wait 48 hours and then I'll make my judgment.
Hmm.
But yeah. All right, section 4. All right, certain monies and repayments evidently were promised to people who gave the Confederate States stuff. And this is absolving the United States from repaying the debts of the
Hmm.
people who financed the rebellion against the United States.
Yeah, because isn't one of the Bill of Rights that the U.S. will pay all debts that it owes or something?
Yeah,
Okay, so this is saying not if it's, used against us or you're fighting against us.
yeah,
That's probably pretty smart.
yep. So, well, North Carolina, who's now the United States again, they took my train, and I need to get paid back for that, or I need a train. Well, you backed the wrong horse. And also, it mentions in here, or any claim for the loss or emancipation of any slave. But all such debts, obligations, and claims shall be held illegal and void. Not just void, illegal and void. So don't even bring it up. Think this is the one-time redress of wrongs against the government cannot be used because the Confederate States came back into the United States and there is no Confederate government to redress anymore.
Hmm. Yeah, so when they seceded, they set up their own government. I didn't never
Yep.
really that did. I mean, how far did they go? Did they have their own president?
Yeah.
Didn't know
Uh,
that.
Jefferson Davis. I do not know where I got that name out of. I just know it magically appeared in my head. And I think I'm right.
So how long were they? I don't know any history apparently. I mean, how long were they, their own nation state, I guess.
For slightly before the war started until the end of the war.
Okay.
Part of Lee's surrender was the dissolution of the Confederate States. Um, Also, part of his surrender is go home and don't do any more rebellion. Pinky swear.
Yeah, I mean, you can't punish your own citizens too hard,
Yeah.
like that's really tough.
And that was one of the terms handed down by Abraham Lincoln to help rebuild America because war and these idiots who are trying to tempt war right now are ultimately stupid. War is a hungry beast. It will devour anything it can get its hands on and anyone. Elderly, women, children, generations, towns, whatever. And Abraham Lincoln had Grant give such generous means to the Southern Army so that rebellion wouldn't have a reason to restart over vengeance, over hanging my pappy because he was wearing the wrong colors and lost. There was no decimation. There was no criminal trials. I think even Jefferson Davis, he was just stripped of everything and died penniless and alone. I could be wrong. This is This is history, but it's like the war's over, let it not devour anybody else.
Yeah, what a level of tact that that whole process must have taken.
Yeah.
What was the United States position globally? Like, were we a world power back then?
No.
So we were still up and coming, and yeah, but that had the power to set us back as much as we let it. So,
Well, also slavery itself, going back to Rabbi Daniel Lapin, money is notes of gratitude with presidents' faces on them. When you don't give people those notes of gratitude for the hard work they don't do the hard work. And micro fan, trades fan, if you don't pay tradesmen, they won't do the work for you and your society will crumble. So I have been a part of handyman services where I've seen people just try to nickel and dime, cheapen the way out, cheaper, 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 cheaper. I want a McDonald's fix. And then they're everything is falling apart and they can't hire any good people because nobody wants to work for minimum wage after having 40 years of experience doing this high something that they got so good at they make it look easy, but it's really not. So back then, by having slaves pick the cotton, they were not getting paid for their work, for their creativity, for their ingenuity. Um, they weren't getting letters of appreciation with presidents' faces on them, and then they couldn't go out and appreciate others. That's the thing about money is it flows. It's not to be kept, it's supposed to flow this way, that way, and the other way. So the economics of the United States of America at the time, not only was slavery wrong, but financially it was disastrous for the South.
hmm.
Men
Yeah,
in the North,
all the money kind of settled at the top, I guess, in the South, huh?
yeah. And in the North, a guy invents something and the money flows into his pockets and he goes out and buys things. Um, the North was where industry was growing rapidly.
Yeah, and you can still see it today. I mean, all the uh, like the factories and stuff, they're all up there.
The shoot, meat packing in Chicago, post-war. Entire trains would bring cows in. The cows would climb up this giant structure. They'd slaughter it at the top, and then all the meat would slide down the entire structure and get split off into different sections. And it was just amazing. And it was gravity fed, and it was mass produced butchery. And then they fed all the other states with the beef. So, because somebody was a genius and built a tall building with several slides and saws in it. But yeah, I mean, it's office space. All right. Any more points on Amendment 14?
No, no, that was interesting. I enjoyed that.
All right. I'm going to go into Amendment 15. The rights, okay, passed by Congress February 26, 1869, ratified February 3rd, 1870. The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. The Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. And that means basically what it says.
Sounds like there was a lot of backlash to Amendment 14, and Amendment 15 kind of said, no, we really mean it
Yeah.
and do this.
Yep. And I talked earlier about you talked about grandfathering out. This was to combat the grandfathering out. Going back to Lincoln, when he was assassinated, from what I hear from historians, his vice president was bent on revenge, while Lincoln was bent on reunification.
Mm.
And by assassinating Lincoln, it put his vice president in a place to have revenge on the South, which had terrible consequences. Um, Part of which I'm not going to go that far. You know what? I'm not even going to say it. But because he was so interested in revenge, he made the South suffer, and that caused, once again, those vengeance hurt feelings that caused the war to continue
Hmm.
Yeah.
in different manners, in the birth of the Ku Klux Klan, in other ways.
Mhm. Yeah, like back then, the world was a lot bigger just because of the lack of technology. So, I mean, how it wasn't exactly something that could be easily enforced. Like sure
Right.
they got the big slave owners. I'm sure they got them, but the little ones who only own a slave or two, or like you don't have the manpower to get them all. So,
And through, well, you actually did because the freed slaves made darn sure that all their relatives heard.
hmm,
I do have to say also you're right about that because after living in the South now, from being a Washington boy, the geography of the South is freaking insane. I mean, we live on a delta. Um, the Carolinas are hills and water cuts. I mean, you can't really place. Portland, Oregon is a wonderful example of sprawl. It just sits and it grows bigger. You can't do that in the Carolinas on the shore because A, hurricanes, B, there's just too many chunks of water separating anything. Anybody who's read Jesus's teachings, like, well, us included, is like, that's a sandy shore. That's not going to last. Let's build it somewhere else. And when you get into the Appalachians and Tennessee and stuff, they basically build their towns on whatever outcropping of ridge you can set something on. That's kind of level because that thing's just bubbly. I mean, it's nothing as grandiose as the Cascade Mountains. I'll grant you that, but they don't have valleys like Washington State has valleys.
Hmm.
They have a hillside. You're on the hillside. So,
yeah, I mean, it only gets more exaggerated the further north you go in the Northeast. Like um, a town near where I'm from in Connecticut is called Stonington, and it's because the ground is nothing but stones. Like,
really,
yeah, and I mean, you can't dig without hitting a stone, like everywhere. Um, and it's so much more pronounced up there. The the terrain, it's all hills and mountains up there. It's crazy. My dad's a truck driver, and he refuses to drive in the Northeast, even though that's where he lives, because
hmm,
driving in the hills and the mountains up there. So it's cool.
yep. Terrain. You forget how big terrain plays in things until you're amongst the terrain.
All right.
All right.
Yeah.
I think I'm awake enough to tackle the worst amendment in the history of the United States of America. Doug, would you read us the horrible Amendment 16?
Sure. Amendment 16 passed by Congress July 2nd, 1909, ratified February 3rd, 1913. Note Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution was modified by Amendment 16. So the Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived without apportionment among the several states and without regard to any census or enumeration.
Income.
So income on all sources.
Yep. From whatever source derived.
Based on a census or divided proportionately. So what does it mean that it's will not be divided proportionally between the states? Like it's not it's not like okay, you have a state that maybe there's like it's a more wealthy state. It's not like that then gets portioned out evenly between all states. They get to keep the majority of like the income that they collected.
Um,
This isn't the federal government taking a piece of the state's income tax. This is the government taking their own piece, right? That's what this is saying.
yes. To okay, going over to the modern reading, it's Congress will have the power to assess and collect taxes on income from all sources. These taxes will not be based on the census or divided proportionally between the states.
So this is where we get the difference between state tax and federal tax, and this is the federal tax.
Possibly, yes. Well, this is where the IRS comes out of.
This is federal.
Mhm.
I, I want to back up really quick to the date 1913 because this is 43 years after the 15th Amendment, and we're taking actually a huge jump into, and I'm going to have to verify this week, the Woodrow Wilson America. Woodrow Wilson is the first my high school was named after Woodrow Wilson. Some reason they didn't talk about Woodrow Wilson. He was a guy who helped do this. He was the guy who showed the first movie in the White House, which was Birth of the Nation, which was talking about how awesome the KKK was. Yay, no wonder they like talking. They did not want to talk about who he was. Um, it is in this period that after 43 years after America had settled down from the war, that a lot of progressive stupidity started taking over. Um, and we're actually going to see that because this one is 1913, and then we got the next one's 1913, and the next one is 1919, 1920, 1933. I mean, it is bing, bang, boom. We suddenly just got a whole bunch of 1933, and then we have a big jump to 1947. So up until Amendment 21, we're all in the same generation of political power. And this is the kickoff, is
Yeah.
that Congress can make taxes.
It's really funny that you say that because as we were reading in section 2 of Amendment 14 about how they went from voting as a family to voting as an individual, even without skin in the game, the thought that kept going into my head was like, man, this is getting like more progressive now. Like you can see the transition.
Mm-hmm. And progressive in this case doesn't mean in a good thing.
Right. Yeah. Like, yeah. That's good clarification.
Yeah.
So what was it that they were trying to fund? I mean, because obviously they're taking taxes, so they want to fund something.
Right.
Well,
Um, so there had been a series of wars. The Spanish American War is one of them. I'm not sure when that was fought off the top of my head. But anytime, all the way back to George Washington, Valley Forge, um, they the Congress was giving bonds that were worthless instead of actually buying goods and sending them to Valley Forge. They were sending bonds that couldn't be used to purchase anything around them. So anytime there's a war, the federal government needs money to help equip the people going to war. This was back in militia days. This was before, no, I'm sorry. This is when we had a federal military. So they had to fund the military, they had to fund the government bureaucracies, they had to fund everything else. And so their answer was an income tax.
mhm.
And one of the things that a lot of guys talk about is changing the IRS income tax into something like a flat tax or a fair tax. I'm prone to the flat tax, 10% from everybody, period. Ben Shapiro has this great line. There's 0% tax and there's 100% tax, in which case nothing gets done. So the question is, where on that line is a proper tax? Um, but yeah, there's a whole lot of other things like, oh boy, there's so much written into this. This thing has just been such a scroll for the company. I would like 10%. You make 1,000, you give 100 back to the government, and they're supposed to do the government things with that. This whole tax system that we have now, which is bigger than the table that this is set on a kitchen table. The pages are bigger than the table that this is set on. The H&R blocks and all those guys are only really reflexively dealing with it as best they can, which, I mean, granted, if we had a flat tax of 10%, then all the accountants would basically go out of business, but it's hard luck. Personally, I am for a federal sales tax than income tax, um, because that would actually help people put money in savings or incentivize them to. Non-food sales tax, so groceries are still not taxable,
Mhm.
but cars, um, fuel, stuff is taxable. 10% for the federal government. If you don't go out and buy something, you're not paying the taxes. But if a super billionaire goes out and buys a yacht, he pays 10%. We go buy a house, we pay 10%. That's personally what I value because what people have noticed is when you tax something, it tends to go away. And this is an income tax.
Yeah, I don't know if I completely agree with your take on the government sales tax.
That's
In,
fine.
in a capitalistic economy, I mean, we have to spend money to survive. That's how the economy works.
Yeah.
Incentivizing people not to spend money, I feel like would have detrimental effects. Not
Hmm.
a good thing, but
Well, we're in Florida and I'm from Washington, so I've yet to live. Oregon, I believe, has an income tax, but not a sales tax.
mm,
So I've lived in those three states mainly. So I've seen sales tax, I've seen income tax. Florida has an income tax, and still there is stuff bought and sold. Um,
Florida doesn't have an income tax. You mean sales tax?
Florida has a sales tax. Yes.
You said income tax.
My apologies. Oregon has an income tax.
Yeah.
Washington has a sales tax. Um, it is really a different way of collecting the taxes because, like you said, money does have to move from hand to hand.
Yeah.
You do have to go out and buy stuff, but you also have to make money to buy stuff. So it really is a if the federal government is there to regulate and govern commerce, then that's the best place to take the money out of is commerce. Whatever gets taxed, the government can investigate
Mhm.
about that really quick. And if we switch it to a sales tax instead of an income tax, then only businesses need an accountant. So let's just say I magically got 10 employees. I would not need 11 accountants. I would need one to cover me. And that way, whatever sales I do, then I have to give a portion to the federal government. But they're only investigating my sales. They only have one person to investigate, which makes their investigations a lot easier because there's fewer people to investigate.
Mhm.
Mm.
Um, Going back to something I shared in our Bible study a while back, about gleaning out to the corners of the field. Something I've noticed in business is that you can get so cost savings focused that you spend money on cost savings. You'll spend dollars to save pennies.
Mhm.
And so if you have a simplified system like, say, a sales tax or even a 10% income tax, even that simplification would reduce the amount of just elbow grease you have to throw at the problem.
Yeah, you're 100% true. I love that topic of the four corners farming. I know it's completely off topic, but Pastor Jeff talked about that last year and it was fantastic. I love that topic.
Yep.
So,
All right. So welcome to the meddling, maybe not progressive, maybe progressively meddling is what we should call it. Welcome to the beginning of progressively meddling. Gentlemen, any final thoughts before we head out?
I really enjoyed this section of it. I think there's a lot of meat to go through,
You
and
enjoyed the IRS?
I think we could have spent an entire hour talking about these amendments without much of a problem.
Yep.
Which is good. I enjoyed this.
Yeah.
Doug, anything from you?
No, despite being a little lengthy, it's more straightforward than some other sections. Yeah.
All right. Who would like to close us out in prayer?
I'll bring it home.
Yep.
Lord, we thank you again for just giving us this time and this platform and the ability to do this. It really is crazy what is actually in the Constitution and how much we can learn and what we can see as the country developed. Um, and Lord, we just pray that you would continue to help us to study this, and we pray that this would reach the people that it needs to reach, and have the impact that it needs to have. We thank you for all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.